Hello and welcome to Homegrown, the Soccer Yanks home for domestic soccer. I am your co-host Dan, and with me, I got Jay. Hi, Jay.
How you doing, Dan?
I'm excellent. I am excellent. I had a wonderful soccer weekend, I think, and I've consumed quite a bit of the round ball. There's been a lot of action since we last met for this podcast. But let's talk about today. Today was the College Cup final, UCLA versus University of Virginia, and a classic rivalry, if I believe.
Yeah, these, especially in the '90s, these are two of the best teams. They haven't really faced each other in the finals, but in the early 1980s to 1990s, from 1989 to 1994, UCLA and Virginia were in the finals. Actually, won the finals out of those 5 years. But it was actually Virginia who won 4 out of those 5 titles, and UCLA won 1. But this is they're both dominant programs coming into this, and they're both reaching their peak this season.
So, final went all the way to penalties. Give me a quick thoughts, quick feelings on the match.
I was disappointed for the most part, but I think every final is a disappointment. You don't expect to see the most beautiful and aggressive soccer and most open play. But I thought UCLA came to play. I thought they were willing to at least pressure, accept the possession, and but Virginia, as they did with the lower opponent in the semifinals against UNBC, they were just happy to counterattack. And I'm not sure if that was a strategy because they're playing 2 games in 3 days, or if that was a strategy because they're playing UCLA. But Virginia just really made it an ugly, unattractive final. And I think with the limited opportunities college soccer has, you watch that game, and I'm not sure how many people are happy to see the next year's final.
I have not tuned into many college soccer finals, and I tuned in today. And Virginia won. I mean, we didn't say that yet. I guess spoiler if you haven't heard, they won in PKs. But Virginia won out of sheer perseverance in maintaining boot the ball down the field. They stuck to it the entire match. They didn't deviate. And they were basically said we're not going to lose, and they didn't. They didn't lose, but we had kind of talked about this pre-show a little bit. I don't know if it was indicative of the talent level, or if it's indicative more of the fact that they played 36 hours prior. It was just not pretty. It was not great. It was not a great display for what you would want to call a youth champion, a college champion. Just it felt lacking.
Yeah, and people are talking about the fact that this was the 16th ranked team in the tournament, but when you're 16th ranked out of 208 teams in college soccer Division 1, compared to the number 2 team in college soccer, I mean that's not a huge gap in talent. And I don't think there's a huge gap in talent. I think the talent between Virginia and UCLA is not a massive gap. I think you might have 1 or 2 players on UCLA side, it might be a little bit better. I think you have a better player in Leo Stolz on UCLA, who is considered the most highly touted player to come out of college right now. He's a Munich 1860 player. He's a little bit older. He's 24. I think he's the best player on the field and he's the best player for the season, talent-wise. But I don't think the overall talent was so great that they had to bunker down. Like we were watching, Name any World Cup game where a underdog minnow was playing one of the big giants, and that's kind of how they play. They play like a minnow,
yeah,
and they didn't need to. This is that kind of team.
It was a little reminiscent of maybe Costa Rica in the knockout stages where they played Campbell up top by himself running around like a maniac, and the other 10 players were all defensive minded.
Right,
and that's because they were a minnow, and it was a little depressing because it was a nationally televised game. Okay, it was on ESPNU, but it was still that's national. It was a platform to showcase And if there was some guy that happened to be flipping through the channels and like, oh, let me check out this soccer thing, it didn't do a very good job of convincing. And maybe that's the person we're not going to ever convince. But maybe it was an opportunity to convince somebody, but it definitely didn't work. It wouldn't have worked.
Yeah, I don't think this was a game that the casual fan would have picked up and watched. I think because just the timing being 12 o'clock, the NFL was on, pregame shows were on. You're not going to get the casual sports fan. But this was a game that the soccer fans wanted to watch. It was a game right after Liverpool and Manchester United play. So you pick up this game, you see what you perceive to be the future of the MLS, and there was actually Virginia had five or six academy players for MLS from various towns, from Red Bulls, from the Union, and I believe from Real Salt Lake. And then you have UCLA, which has 7 Galaxy players, 1 Sounders, and then 1 player from 1860 Munich. So you have some of the best young players in the world who are not playing, or some best young players in the country who are not playing on an MLS or professional club to play this game. And there was no reason why Virginia to play such a cynical game other than they felt like they couldn't play well enough due to the fatigue. Because I said before, they played against a significantly lesser talented opponent. By significantly lesser talented opponent, I mean by significantly prestigious. Virginia's getting the first choice players, and University of Maryland, Baltimore County are not getting the first choice players, and they played the same way. They played very cynical, bunkered in soccer for 90 minutes. So Virginia won the championship. They walked away with the championship. They got their trophy, but I hope this game makes the NCAA recognize that if they want to sell this sport, they might want to think about changing the finals and maybe giving them an extra day between the semifinals and the finals.
Couldn't agree with you more there. More rest probably couldn't have hurt. It couldn't have hurt what we saw. So, in the vein of finals, the last Major League Soccer match of the year was played. LA won in an okay. It was the first half was a little scatterbrained match against New England. It ended up going to overtime and then finished before penalties, which was nice. With this match, I mean, we don't really need to talk about the match. It's probably a little stale now at this point. But with this match was the last match for Landon Donovan. And there's been so much fanfare about Landon Donovan, but I think you and I, not that we don't respect the man and we don't think he's talented, but I think we have a different perspective on his career and his impact. You want to take it from there?
Yeah, and I think this both comes from our background. And I can say this to myself, and I think you might agree, is we're both son of immigrants, and our first favorite soccer teams weren't the U.S. national team. I mean, my first favorite team was the Spanish national team. I think yours would be the Brazilian national team. And, we've seen great players come and gone, and when I wrote the article originally, back when Landon Donovan wasn't accepted to the U.S. national team for the World Cup, I compared it to Raul, who is a significantly better player, significantly more accomplished, achieved more in the world stage than Landon Donovan, not getting accepted to the Europa League while he's still the Europa Cup while he's still playing at the highest level for Real Madrid. And to me, thinking about Landon Donovan and comparing it to Raul not making the Euro, I didn't think it was a big deal. And I think about it also in my personal background, being somebody who has a degree in management. When you're Jurgen Klinsmann, Landon Donovan never ingratiated himself. Jurgen Klinsmann while he was on the U.S. national team, and he didn't have a good first 9 games with the MLS. So I recognize how great he was for MLS, and I recognize that he could still play at a very high level with MLS. I don't have him in this high regard, prestigious view as him as other people might have, because I do have a wider perspective, fandom to other aspects.
I mean, you got 2 big points there, and I agree. As far as being the son of an immigrant, yes, you're 100% correct. I grew up watching Brazil before I watched the United States. Watching the United States was my prerogative. It was not my parents they never put that in me. That was me that when I got old enough, I'm like, well, I'm going to root for the United States too. And I still, when I watch the World Cup, I still do root for Brazil. I'm a first generation American. It's there. And in the vein that you use Raul as an example, I remember being I wasn't really even a kid. I guess I was a teenager. And Romario didn't make the '98 World Cup. Kaká didn't make the last one. Ronaldinho didn't make the last one. These are all guys that, to be perfectly frank, Donovan cannot hold a candle to any of those guys. And they were left off the team. And so to me, I look at it like when people complain about, like, well, Donovan would have had an impact on this World Cup squad and Jurgen left them. No, you're absolutely correct, Jay. He didn't put himself in a position to succeed because of his own actions. And I hold a grudge against him in that sense, because we as fans lived and died with his decisions. And maybe he could have had an impact, but I don't blame JK, I don't blame Klinsmann for him not bringing him. I think that he did the right thing, because there was a guy that wasn't putting his team first, wasn't putting his teammates first. He was putting himself first for whatever reasons, so on and so forth, whatever. The one thing that I always find, in the what if world, and sometimes it's okay to play the what if world. He signed that early contract with Leverkusen, and he just did not fall in love with the German culture, and it just was like he wasn't happy there. He kept flying, he flew home quite often to play for the U teams. He just didn't want to be there. What it boiled down to, that's why he got loaned back to San Jose, I believe. What if, because he did have very successful spells at Everton, what if it had not been a German team that had found him when he was 17 or 18 years old? I forget how old he was when he signed that first contract. What if it was an English team? Do you think his path would have been different?
No, and I think about this and I'm not saying I know any more than any other person knows him outside of the context of watching him on TV, but I think knowing him and knowing also the American mentality, you go from being the great young hope to being the greatest thing in the world to being somebody who now has to go and take a step back and concede to people who you might perceive to be less than you and not earning that situation. Because I think when he went to Leverkusen, I think he, at that same age, he would have went to England and not gotten playing time. He might have sat the bench for a long period of time. He might have not been in regular rotation. And obviously he's a person who wants to be honest and speak his mind. Would he have the ability to be humbled a little bit and take his lumps like other people have, like people who were grown men when they came, like Dempsey and Howard, who were more mature when they went over to overseas and took their lumps and were humbled and got their opportunities? I don't think at his age he would have had that. He would have had that ability.
That's a good point. I do forget sometimes when we look at these guys that they're not looking through the same lenses as I am. They don't have the same life experience. They're younger, especially when you hear of a professional athlete, a 22-year-old professional athlete that does some numbskull thing. I'm like, well, I was 22 once too. I probably did some things, and I agree that he probably was not. Didn't matter where he would have gone. Those feelings were there, and he needed to grow past them, and it probably wouldn't have worked.
Yeah, and I think kind of what we're saying here, and more than anything else, is that Landon was phenomenal for MLS. He was phenomenal for the U.S. national team. He's the first great MLS player who spent his entire career with MLS. We see him go. But there's going to be significantly better people, and I think a lot of people who are talking about him in such an emotional way, and I've heard so many people who I respect on podcasts and read talk about him in reverence, like people who, like we're talking about Larry Bird and Michael Jordan. And on a skill level, Larry Bird and Michael Jordan in their own respective sports, he doesn't even touch that. He doesn't even scratch that surface. He was an excellent player in the league, and he is an excellent player on the world stage in his conference. But there's going to be better. There will be better, and he's just the first stepping stone. And I think we need to kind of let go of this sainthood of Landon Donovan that we all kind of want to put onto him.
I think in the long term we will be able to, and I think the people that are honest with themselves will be able to look back and go, he was a high watermark for the time, but it was a benchmark that we needed to surpass. It's not I think 20, 30, 40 years from now he'll go down as someone that was very important for the growth of the game, but he's not going to, when they start talking about skill wise, when you get into these Pele, Maradona arguments, You know, he's not going to be involved in that argument. I don't believe 30, 40, 50 years from now. I think it's going to be he was going to be like that, like the it's kind of, maybe I'm trying to make an analogy, trying to find another sport analogy. Maybe perhaps Babe Ruth. I think Babe Ruth was but the problem is that he was the pinnacle at the time of his own sport. I can't find. I'm having troubles finding an athlete that had an impact on the game regionally, but not overall.
I think the best analogy would be to kind of take it back to basketball. He was Bill Russell. He won the most championships. He had the most impact at the time. In 10 years or 20 years from now, if he plays the MLS, he might be an all-star, but he wouldn't be the best player.
Right. That is a great analogy. Bill Russell. So I mean, he's a young man, 32 years old. We are all young men.
Sure we are.
Of 32 years young. This is the one thing that always sticks with me. If I was doing the thing that, like, my passion, I guess maybe that's what it is. It's not his passion. He's done with it. But if I was doing my passion, 32 years old, and there's no way I'm retiring. Luca Toni scored a goal this weekend. He's 37. So, anyway, so it's one door closes, another door opens. Major League Soccer teams are now already starting to plan for the upcoming season, and there's a lot of chatter. This is maybe a little bit team specific, but I think it's an interesting topic overall, and it kind of ties in with the College Cup final. But there's a lot of chatter that the New York Red Bulls are going to forego the veteran mentality and have a quote unquote youth movement. Now, did they watch the College Cup final?
I know they do scout people. I've talked to some of the scouts, and I know they do have a lot of people who they're scouting. And I think the team has a more realistic approach to the youth movement than the fans do. And I say this because I listened to Seeing Red on I guess it was Back Heel Now, and I think it's an excellent podcast. I think there's always one podcast that every fan base listens to that gives you great knowledge, and that's the one for the Red Bulls. And listening to the most recent college show, everyone is so excited about the youth movement for the Red Bulls and how we're going to see the young players achieve so much and how it's going to be so great because we're seeing all these old European retreads come into the team and they never succeed and everything. But the reality is there's, maybe in every conference might have 3 guys who have 5-year careers in the MLS. Because the truly great guys are either in the academy system that can come straight through or play 1 year, or they are coming from Europe or South America. And I don't think fans in MLS realize that the college system is not like the NBA or the NFL where you build your future through the college draft. A lot of these guys, you might get a great player, you might get a US national team player, but most of these guys are kind of supplemental rotation guys. So I think people who are looking at the Red Bulls expecting to see what happened in Colorado, which really only had 2 or 3 college players. I mean, Dylan Powers, who was a phenomenal college player, and Deshaun Brown. That's not going to happen for the Red Bulls. And I think maybe, for any team, I think it's probably better of a mixture than this youth movement that the fans and the Red Bulls and any other fan system is begging for.
It's got to play, you got to make the system work for you. So you have a cap. We don't know what the cap is going to be next year, I believe. Or is this next season the last cap season that we're set on?
Well, the negotiations of this season, there hasn't been a whole lot of word out there. Obviously, there's not a whole lot of people doing reporting on the what's going on with the negotiations. And I believe from what I heard, the first proposal by the players' union was put out this week, and obviously that's going to be rejected. They might, who knows how much elements of that they're going to accept. But I hope to see something where there's a revenue tie-in with the cap. Because I did an article that was based on a similar study, which basically said that the revenue tie-in for the MLS from the records we have, is only 20% of the revenue goes to the players' salaries.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see something closer to 50%, like in every other major sports league. And that's the union to figure out how to make that happen. But as of right now, we don't know the salaries. But even regardless of the salary cap, I don't think the college system. I just think in general, the college system, relying on the college system, is going to work for any team.
Well, that's what I'm getting. That's what I'm getting at. I'm like, well, you have a cap, right? So you do have money available to you, or you're going to pay these. You're going to pay the younger guys their market value. You're not going to overpay them just because you have spare cap space. So use the system available to you. Yes, of course, integrate youth players, integrate younger guys. That's absolutely paramount to success of a club. But you cannot forego, bringing in experience and veterans that are going to help, cement a team. To a 23-year-old, a 24-year-old guy that's coming into Major League Soccer the first time out, even though they may be, may have had, I don't know, hundreds of matches under their belt. They're still not going to have hundreds of professional matches under their belt. It's going to be a different beast. It's going to be a different pressure. You cannot forego. I think that anyone that wants one way or the other, a team filled with veterans and a team filled with young guys, it's not. Neither one is going to necessarily work. You got to find the right balance, and you got to find the right balance that fits within your system, your pay system we have here. It's one thing if you had an open bank account. That's a whole other ball game.
Right, and also I think what people understand about college is essentially a lot of these great players live off of the mistakes of the average players. The ball is not. We were talking about the technical ability, and people complain about technical ability of MLS players, but the technical ability of a soccer player, the average soccer player, is like on the low end, if they're lucky, of an MLS player. They don't get the ball cleanly. They don't transition quickly. And the most goals are scored off of high-pressure situations where they're getting the ball in the other team's half of the field and then turning around and scoring. You can't rely on those ways to score. You can't rely on those ways to be effective. So it's a different system in college. It's a different way of playing in college. Much more physical. It's actually a lot. In all honesty, while the game is not played with the ball faster, the speed of the game is faster because everybody's at their physical prime almost. So in a weird way, people are closed down faster. Because they're playing, everybody in college, except for Virginia this weekend, plays almost a high press system because you get substitute out, and everyone's young, so they have the legs to run for days, and so it's just a different game and a different transition, and I think that's the next step for MLS. You can't rely on a lot of college players because it's just a different game, and the next step for MLS is getting teams to play more to what the MLS plays defensively, not offensively, but defensively, than they do in college, because you just can't play that system way. Most teams can't play that way over 90 minutes.
No, absolutely. We've seen very few professional teams across the world that can do that effectively for a match. I mean, some teams can apply that for 15, 20 minutes, maybe, and then they got to give it up and go to something a little bit more efficient energy-wise. Well, it's interesting to see that we're at the threshold of perhaps a new era. It would be interesting to see if college does go to a long schedule, making it a fall and spring sport, and with the new initiative from USSF that you had written about this week about trying to find the cracks in our system and figure out ways to improve upon them from the youth level all the way up.
Right. It's a long process, and I am not actually 100% confident that the two semester system for college soccer will happen, only because I'm not sure how that's going to implement with the MLS draft. So unless the MLS is planning on getting rid of their draft, I don't know how the MLS and NCAA are going to make that work out. But listen, we'll see. And there's changes coming, and it all looks like it's for the better. So let's just see.
Well, I think they. Well, I mean, just a spitball, real quick. Let's say that they do have they do go to the full year. So let's say the college soccer season ends in June, something like that. Well, those players would be eligible for the draft 6 months later. I think that's what would end up happening at the end of the season. I can't see them. What are they going to do? A mid-season draft that doesn't quite work, or maybe they're going to do a 3/4 of a year college season where the players will be available in March. How does that? They're going to have to do something like that. It's just going to have the long break.
Or they can have where the college soccer season is broken into like 2 seasons, kind of like how the NASL does it, where there's a spring and a fall season.
Liga MX does the same as well, right?
Right. I mean, that's what I can think of it happening. Or you just say, okay, well, we don't have to live by the MLS's draft rules. We're the NCAA. We can do what we want to do. For example, I mean, NASL, they're accepting players on a regular basis all the time. The NCAA doesn't have to go 100% what the MLS is doing. They don't have to go 100% what the USSF is doing. So there's options and there's choices, and the college coaches are going to probably get whatever way they want, more than likely, which is the season-long process. And people are going to have to make decisions, and one of those decisions might actually happen to be an actual MLS reserve league in the summer, where they draft players and then they sit there, get paid, and play reserve games for, I guess it would be 3-4 months, 5 months, and not go to the main team until I guess maybe like kind of do what baseball does, where they have like a fall call up in September.
Huh. That is one possibility. Okay, this year marks 100 years from the December truce, I believe it was.
The Christmas truce.
Excuse me, the Christmas truce during World War I between the troops in no man's land. They put down their arms and they played soccer.
Yeah.
Was it a day? Was it a day or 2 days?
I believe it was 2 days. I think they started Christmas Eve and went into Christmas Day.
And they literally, got up out of the trenches and played friendly matches of football. I mean, that's kind of an incredible feat.
I mean, I think you would kind of have to say that's probably the most important game in the history of soccer.
Yes, I think so. It's something about this sport. It's a division. It's like it's so dividing, but it's also so unifying. It's such an interesting game. Anyway, on that note, that's the name of our quick-fire questions, the Christmas truce. And I'm going to go first. First question tonight. This year marked the retirement of both Landon Donovan and Thierry Henry, 2 superstars of Major League Soccer. Overall, who had a greater impact on Major League Soccer?
That's a great question. Okay. I'm going to say 60-40 Henry, because his ability to play, his ability not to actually dominate and win. I mean, he dominated on the field, but he didn't win all the championships. The narrative was that Beckham came in, won championships, dominated the league. The league is pedestrian. Really, he had Landon Donovan on his team. He had a lot of great players on his team. He had a great coach. He had a great coach with that team. And he won championships because of the team, not because of him by himself. Henry dominated on the field and still wasn't able to win. And more than anything else, he respected the league. Always. He watched more Major League Soccer than anybody. And I think that kind of gave credence to people who are coming over to take this seriously, because he takes it seriously and he can't even do it. I think the legacy for Landon is guys like Matt Beasler and Graham Zusi staying their whole careers here, but I think but Henry is the guys coming in who are towards the end of their careers, not like Jermaine Defoe, even though he might leave, but Jermaine Defoe coming in here realizing that this is not an easy league.
I think I agree with you. it all boils down to an outsider, quote unquote, someone that would be a typical case for someone to say a Euro snob that believes that Europe is so much better and superior, a World Cup winner, a Champions League winner, an invincible in the Premier League, comes to Major League Soccer and has a very famous quote, "Don't knock it if you don't play here." And I think that line sums up exactly what I mean. He was a spokesperson for the league that had nothing to gain from being a spokesperson for the league. He wasn't going to become a legend. He wasn't going to become a legend here in the United States. He wasn't going to move the needle here in the United States. He was saying it because he believed it. Where Landon Donovan was huge for American soccer. He was huge for the U.S. men's national team. But that's insular. That's inside our bubble. Landon Donovan doesn't move the needle outside of our bubble. Henry does. And that to me, that's why him in the way that he treated the league and the respect he gave for it and how he spoke about the league. I mean, he criticized the league too, when rightfully so in certain cases. But I think his being such an ambassador for this is not an easy place to win, that goes a long way for me.
Where's Henry going? To Arsenal or Lyon to finish his career? Or you can go with retire.
Oh, it's an ABC. I think he's going to retire. I think in my heart of hearts says he's gonna go to Arsenal, sign a 6-month deal, ride the pine, play a few minutes here and there, play in the FA Cup, and then retire, and then go on to coach. I don't think he's going back to France, but you never know. He's French. There's probably many opportunities there for him, and there's also that's his homeland. So, but my if I had to wager, he just retires.
I would say he's going to. I think he's going to go to Ligue 1. I think there's a lot of money in Ligue 1. I think there's interesting things going on. But the only problem is, though, I think the issue I have with this is I'm not sure where he's going to go. I believe is he a Lyon? Was he a Lyon?
He played in Monaco for Wenger.
Monaco.
He played for Monaco with Wenger.
Okay, well, all right.
I don't know where he.
Monaco's falling apart right now, so I don't know if he would go to Monaco.
I don't know where he played his youth, though. That's where he played his pro ball. I really don't know where he played his youth. Because he's not from Monaco. He's from somewhere else. I don't know. For some reason, Bordeaux is sticking in my head, but I could be totally wrong on that.
I just want to be a contrarian, even though I do agree with you 100% that he's going to do the 6-month contract, player coach situation, youth team deal. All right. All right, so let's get the last question in. So I know you watched the game today, so you saw Leo Stoles, and then you were with me covering the Georgetown Seton Hall game, and you saw Joshua Urich. If Joshua Urich does decide to go into the MLS draft, because he will be a junior next year, so he have to get a Generation Adidas contract. If he decides to go in, who would get drafted first, Leo Stoles or Joshua Urich?
That's a tough one. I mean, I'm going to be totally honest with you. I've only seen each one of them play once. That's the truth right there. So, based on singular performances, based on singular performances, based on what I saw, one I saw in person and the other one I watched on TV. I'm going to be honest with you. Stoles was all over the field. He looked like he could be deployed anywhere in the front 6 players. That kind of versatility, and I think is very useful, especially in Major League Soccer where you have restrictions on your roster. You want to be able to get a guy that you could plug in somewhere, especially a young guy that you can maybe mold into whatever your weakness is. I think he goes first. Stoles.
I think there's plus and minuses both places. I think Urich will be the first one picked, even though I think Stoles will probably have the better career long term Because I think Stoles, even though he doesn't have a position, quote unquote, because he can go all over the field, like you said, you kind of know what you want to do with him. You want him to be an attacker. You want him to be either the number 10 or off to the side, or even maybe a box to box guy. He's I believe he's only 5'10". He's fast. He's really athletic, but he plays center back currently, so he's undersized for the position. And I think that's the only hesitance I get with him. And the other thing Leo Stoles is he's 24. Except for he's played in Munich 1860, but he is a little bit older, which is not usually an issue for MLS. But I think because you have a more defined position for him and you kind of know what you want to do with Leo Stoles, I put him ahead of Uric, and I also think he'll probably have the better overall career.
Good point, and I think also Major League Soccer does value power and speed, which Uric has plenty of speed for sure.
Yeah, I've never seen an overlapping center back, but he's it. If that's it, if you could call him that kind of style, he's an overlapping center back.
Overlapping. That's the David Luiz. That's the frantic center back.
Right. But he does it like once a game. He does it. It's kind of like the flashy at the end of the game to kind of show off. He doesn't do it at random moments when you shouldn't be. You should kind of keep your stuff together.
On that note, that's a great spot to put a bow tie on this thing and call it a Christmas present. Wrap it up. Let's wrap it up. Thank you everyone for listening tonight. If you enjoy this podcast, please take a look at socceryanks.com. We have some great content. Jay writes for us. We have a few other writers that are covering Europe, U.S. men's national team, MLS. We have a couple other podcasts. We have a podcast that focuses on the Premier League and Champions League, and a fan podcast for Chelsea FC. If that's your bag, if it's not your bag, just pass. If you have any comments you want to send our way, please send it to socceryanks@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter, SoccerYankDan. Jay?
I'm Resina Red on Twitter.
If they want to read about New Jersey college soccer, where do they go?
njcollegesoccer.com.
Excellent. And that is it, folks. Thank you very much.